Daler is none other than the maker of that fantastic gluten-free pumpkin bread. We have with us Miss Maureen Daler. And with
Hi. When I was in the 3rd grade,
Come closer.
okay, I don't know, you didn't have a microphone last time, did you?
Yeah, you did.
Well, I became obsessed with getting a bike.
Gotta get real up
Okay.
close, okay?
All right,
Yeah, this you-
all right. And one of the reasons I became obsessed was I was from a working class family, and we did not have bikes of our own. Well, my brother did, but boys were different. The summer before my 3rd grade, we had this bike donated to us. It was the smallest two-wheeler anybody had ever seen. I don't even know a child that would be mature enough to ride that bike that was that size. But anyway, my Uncle Cornelius was coming from Ireland to visit our grandmother. And my sister and I couldn't wait to get to see him. So we took this bike. And she was 2 years younger than I was. So she rode in the handlebars. I sat on the handlebars, and I had to ride the bike with my knees out like this. So I'm doing this, and she's trying to hold on and stay on the... Anyway, we get almost there, about a quarter mile left, and we went around the corner, and we took a dive. And she said it was my fault. I caught my knee under the handlebars. I don't really know. I said it was her fault because she lost her balance and took us off balance. And we sprawled on the tar of the street, and we had little cuts from head to toe. And our mother had dressed us up in nice little matching sunsuits to go to meet our uncle from Ireland, and we show up arguing and bleeding. So my grandmother, patches up, and we get to meet our uncle, and we're all excited. So when I went back to school, I still had this burning passion to have my own bike. And in a lot of places, I guess around the world, they had a thing called the Milk Fund. And they would give, any kid who wanted a little canister to go around and collect for the Milk Fund. And the kid who collected the most money in the entire city, which at that point in time, Brockton had a population of 70,000, would win a bike. So I decided at 8 years old, I was going to win that bike. And so I tell my father, can you help me? I really want to win this bike. And I know if I had collected the years before, all the kids in the neighborhood were collecting, so you can't collect from anybody else in the neighborhood. And so you only got a couple of relatives to collect from. You're not going to get much. I got to do something different. So he worked at City Hall in the boiler room, but I thought, he worked at City Hall, And so he knew the city. So anyway, he said he would help me. So every day after school, I got out. I would meet him at City Hall. He would take me around the corner in front of Edgar's department store, the biggest department store in downtown, and then he would coach me. So at first I'd be like, "Love to people go, please help them look for me." My father said, no. You got to look them in the eye. And I wasn't taught to look adults in the eye. I wasn't taught to not look adults in the eye, but only unless, if they were chastising me, I had to look them in the eye. But otherwise, no. But so, that was it took me a while to kind of get going with that. And then he also taught me to, if they were trying to walk around me, sidestep right in front of them. And don't let them get by you. And then he also had me say, put my arms up like this. Please help the Milk Fund. Be firm. And it was a strange experience for a kid that age. And over time, I learned so much from seeing people. At first, I was non-discriminatory. Anybody who walked by, please help the Milk Fund. That could be the poorest looking person I ever saw. And then I saw in their faces the shame when they didn't have money to give me, or they would give me a penny and feel terrible that all they had was a penny. And then I had rich people with fur stoles being annoyed with me that I sidestepped in front of them and kind of forced them into this. And then they had to make a big show of it, putting a $5 bill or something in. So over time, I started looking down the street and saying, okay, I'll pick that one, I'll pick that one, I'll pick that one, I won't pick these other people who don't have the money. And I really worked hard. I went every Saturday, Sunday, nothing downtown was open, so, and I came in second. And the second prize was a badminton set. Not even close. And the girl that won, I knew her. And her father helped her too. And he took her to the bars that he frequented every night. And I don't know how much she got, but she got more than I did. And my parents and I felt like that was unfair competition. I couldn't go to the bars. My father wasn't going to take me to the bars. Of course, the milk fund, what would they care? It's money. And so I had a bit of a hard time with it, but I kind of finally let go of it. And over time, I would realize how much I learned about myself and about people in that process of making decisions about who I would ask and who I wouldn't ask, and the expressions on their face and looking them in the eye. And I think it really helped lead me into human services over time, because in human services, you really need to be able to look people in the eye and recognize their pain unflinchingly. And it's what I think that helped a lot. And eventually, I realized that, or learned that Debbie, who won first prize, as an adult was not faring too well. And I would finally be able to reflect back and realize that she needed that win so much more than I did.
Our next teller from the hat, and if anyone else decides to get up and tell, please just put your name in the hat or let me know. Okay, the hat commanded. Warren, a new teller. All right, come on up, Warren, recently from Long Island. You didn't say it that way, so I give you big ups.
You didn't say Long Island. You said Island.
Okay, in May of 1988, I was diagnosed with AIDS. I was in the closet, gay, and I was, my first job out of college, working in Manhattan, and one of my colleagues, Rick, took me under his wing, and he showed me the seamy underground way of gay life. You know, these clandestine encounters in parks, Central Park, and video booths and stuff like that. But I was always very safe because this was the era of AIDS, and I was very scared of that. But several months down the line, I remember I was feeling really, really run down and depleted, and no energy, like I was hit by a truck. And so I went to my local doctor on Long Island, and he was going to do blood work. I confided in him that I was experimenting homosexually, but I was very safe, I said, so I had no concern about HIV and AIDS. He was glad to hear that. And he said, so we'll see what the blood work shows. So 2 days later, it was Memorial Day weekend, start of summer, on a Saturday. He calls me at home. I was still living at home, my parents, and it was 9 o'clock, and he said, you have to come to the office now. He said, I got your blood test results, and your white blood cell count has plummeted, and I'm really alarmed. And he says, you're going to come back here, and I'm going to give you an HIV test. Well, I said there's no need for an HIV test, and I didn't want to take an HIV test because in those days, there was no treatment or anything. So it was a big to if you wanted to take the test or not take the test, because if you were positive, there was nothing to do. You just wait for symptoms and to die. So he said, I said, there's no need to take for the test. I was safe, and he just said, well, then if you don't want to take the test, do not come back here because I'm not going to treat you. So I said, well, it must be, I was starting to panic, and I said, I don't know why we're even having this discussion. And he said, because I think you have AIDS. So, I was shocked, and I just went numb. And he said, so you can be an ostrich and stick your head in the sand, or you can come back to the office, I'm going to test you, and we will deal with whatever it happens. So I went back to his office, and I just remember how beautiful, all of a sudden, I was in my early 20s, and I was seeing how beautiful the grass, how green it was, and the beautiful flowers. It was the beginning of summer, and I never noticed how gorgeous the world was before. And I was sad that I wasn't going to be around all that much longer to experience this. And so I went back, and they took more blood, the nurse took more blood, and I took the HIV test, and he calls me into his office to have a private consultation. He says, as a physician, I have to tell people when they have terminal diagnoses. And he says, my patients thank me because it gives them time to get their affairs in order. So, the next week, I was calling up crazy the Gay Men's Health Crisis Hotline and detailing every encounter that I've had. And because I needed the reassurance that I was safe, and I would get that most of the time, and I needed to hear it over and over and over again, that there was, engaged in not risky behavior, and there shouldn't be any need for concern. But one counselor did not get me to say that, and he said, well, if I was to tell you that you had nothing to be concerned about, I'd be a liar. So that I didn't like to hear. That was, got me panicky. And then another counselor was furious at the doctor because he said, this is illegal. The doctor cannot refuse to give you treatment and demand that you take an HIV test or say you cannot come back to treatment. So he wanted the name and number of the doctor to educate that doctor. He said, because on Long Island, he says, has the highest rate of HIV/AIDS of any suburban area in the country because there's so many bisexual men and they're not honest with their doctors about their behavior. And so that's why HIV/AIDS is spreading like wildfire on Long Island. And it's because of doctors like yours, doctor, who they will not confide in. But I thought the doctor was doing me a favor, I thought he was scaring me straight. I also, I felt that AIDS was God's punishment of homosexuals. And so I would not give him the name and the number of the doctor. And he was furious, and that more men are going to die of AIDS on Long Island, and because I'm not, allowing him to contact the doctor. So it was just a really, really awful, awful time. And that next week, it was, I had a lot of nightmares, and everyone knew there was something terribly, terribly wrong, but I couldn't tell anyone, because there was such stigma about being gay and AIDS epidemic and, work. People would be fired just for being gay, and particularly if it was thought that you had AIDS. And I was still living at home, and my mom, she hated homosexuals, and she hated me, and so I didn't know if I'd be thrown out of the house, and so a week later, a week goes by, and the doctor, he calls me at work, and I don't know whether to take the call because I'm at work, and he's going to tell me I have HIV, AIDS, and I can't have work. I don't know if I'm going to scream or cry, whatever. So, I thought if it's negative, this would be such a tremendous relief. So I took the call. He said the blood work has come in, not the HIV test, okay, because that took like 3 to 4 weeks to get the result back in those days, in the late 80s, He said, but you had a heady bout of mononucleosis. And he was shocked that I was going to work every single day, and that he said I should have been bedridden for weeks. And so now he thinks I'm a Superman. And he wants to know what my physical fitness regimen is and what my nutrition is, because he can't believe the strength that I had. Not even one day did I miss from work. So a week prior, he's telling me he thinks I have AIDS, and now he's saying what great shape I'm in. So I was glad to hear it, and he said he would call me when he got the HIV result in. I said, I don't want to know. I said, because if it's positive, what am I going to do? So he says, you don't want me to call you even if it's negative? And I said, no. I said, because if you don't call me, then I'll know it's positive. So just don't call me. And he didn't like hearing that answer, but he relented and agreed. And he tells me to hang on the phone. And so I hang on the phone, and then the nurse came into his office, and then he gets back to the phone. He says, you're negative. And I don't know how he got the result in 1 week, because it took 3 to 4 weeks, but he had it. And he just tells me to go on with my life and forget about any of this. And, well, that was easier said than done. And maybe in a future time I'll say the rest of the story from that point on.
Who is next? Okay. Here we go. Cindy Kane. Cindy, Hurricane Kane over here is going to blow you away with her story. Come on.
So this is a story about something that spent most of my life literally hidden in plain sight. For decades, I walked past my mother's aloe plants without giving them much thought, because they were literally everywhere, right? Like, I know imagination exaggerates, but there were little pots on the kitchen windowsill. There were clay pots in the bathroom. There were hanging baskets out on the patio where the turtle doves nested every spring. There were giant wooden planters, and they were overflowing with those thick green fronds. There was aloe growing out of bird baths and an old fish tank and even a clawfoot tub. It was just part of the landscape of being home, right? And it wasn't until after both of my parents had died that I finally understood what I'd inherited. I thought it was an aloe plant. It turned out to be so much more. This realization came when I was dividing the aloe that I inherited from my dad, who inherited it from my mother. And it is hardy stock. It spent the first half of its life living in California, and the second half of its life here in Vermont. And it asks very little of this world. Just a little sandy soil, a little water, not too much, and some space to grow, right? So every few years, I have to thin mine out to keep it healthy. A few years ago, back when we were still isolating because of COVID, it was time for a culling. So I separate the babies from the mamas out of my big giant pot, and I sort them into little piles that are kind of based on size and the integrity and size of the root. And then I spread the word that I had aloe available free to good homes. And then I set up a self-service aloe station in my front yard. Most of those aloe eventually found homes with friends and some neighbors and even some complete strangers. And somewhere along the way, I found myself wondering, why the heck did I care so much about these plants? I mean, they're just plants, right? Except they're not. See, to understand what I mean by that, I need to tell you more about my mother. For most of my childhood, it was just me, Mama, and my sister. Without a college degree, my mom built a pretty amazing life based solely on grit and determination. She hustled cocktails and slung hash in the finest eateries and the raunchiest hockey talks with equal grace. Later on, she put herself through real estate school while holding down 2 waitressing jobs and raising 2 daughters. And then she went on the next year to sell $3 million of real estate in her 2nd year. That was my mama. She was always moving, she was always doing, she was always on the go. But that is actually not what defined her. Let me 1 second. The truest thing that I can tell you about my mom is this. No matter how full her plate was, if yours was running over, she would be right there to help you out. Whether you needed a ride because the damn car was on the fritz again, or you needed to get that kid out of your house for the summer before somebody gets hurt. It didn't matter. My mom would be right there to lighten your load. Sorry. See, it didn't matter how busy she was, she just always found the time. Not because she expected anything in return, not because anybody was watching her, not because it made her look good. She helped because she just generally loved. The ancient Greeks had a word for that kind of love. Agape. Love expressed through selfless action. So looking back now, I realize that my mama didn't just grow aloe, she lived aloe. Aloe gives more than it takes. It heals. It endures. And whenever hers got too large, she divided it and she gave it away. She loved sharing her aloe almost as much as she loved to grow it. When she sold a new house, she always left a little aloe in a pot in the new kitchen. And when I got my first apartment, she showed up with 2 things, aloe and a broom. Both very practical acts of love. But the story that forever ties aloe and love together for me happened decades later in McCall, Idaho. Every summer, my grandparents packed their pickup and drove from Tulare, California, up to McCall. Grandpa Leo had a half shell that he had customized with bunk beds and a walkie-talkie system rigged up to the cab, and he'd throw anywhere from 3 to 6 grandkids in the back, and he'd just head north. And McCall is a small mountain town. It's surrounded by rivers bursting with trout. It has a Rexall store downtown that sells ice cream sundaes. It has a small Nazarene church and a big, beautiful lake with waterside cabins. So that was pretty much heaven to my Papa Leo, the son of a preacher. And as much as my mama loved aloe, my grandpa loved to fish. And he taught all us cousins how to fish. He taught us how to bait a line, how to cast a hook, how to reel it in, and how to clean our catch. He liked to take us grandkids fishing, but truth be told, once we got to a certain age, he didn't actually like fishing with us. So he preferred to rock hop his way upstream, chasing what he liked to call the smart ones. And he'd find a nice place for us to sort of set up, and he would tell us, you just got to cast your line in over there. You just gotta let it run down through there, pull it out before it hits them rocks, you won't get snagged. You just keep doing that, you're gonna find a trout that wants that worm. And then head off to do some real fishing, right? So fast forward, decades later, and we're having one of those, let's all do this one more time while we can kind of family vacations. And I think this must be why my mom was there, because she never came to McCall. I mean, first of all, she's working all the time. Second of all, I gotta imagine a month without her kids must have been like bliss for her, right? Her summer vacation. But this particular year, she was there. And this particular year, Grandpa took all his cousins fishing. And he found a nice spot in a big, beautiful alpine meadow. The sun was so warm and delicious that as soon as my grandpa snuck away, I stripped down to my boxers, a tank top on my waders, and I fished in that river all day long. I don't know how many of you have ever spent much time up in an alpine meadow, but they are deceptively soft. You don't really feel the heat until far too late, and the sun has already had its way with you, you know? I was old enough to know better. I was old enough to know that I should have packed some sunscreen, and I surely had the sense to find some shade. But common sense did not prevail that day, and I proceeded to get the worst sunburn of my entire life. I'm talking a 360-degree sunburn, shins to shoulders sunburn, can't sit, can't think, fever heat, air hurts kind of sunburn. And when we got back from fishing, my mom took one look at me and she flew into full mama bear mode. She knew that her baby girl needed one thing. She needed some aloe, that's right. And everybody says to my mom, they says, Lee May, you ain't gonna find aloe this time of night. It's Sunday night, the Rexall's closed, right? But they did not know the power of a mama on a mission. And you know what? She did find some. And you know why? Because she was smart. See, the mountains of the Northwest are prone to forest fire. And where there is fire, there are firefighters. And firefighters know well the healing power of aloe. So my mama went and found a ranger station where they in fact grew and cultivated aloe right there at the station for this very purpose. And she told them about her silly kid who had gotten herself so badly sunburned, and they sent her away with armfuls of aloe, which she brought back and cut in half and stripped away all the little spiky edges. And then she sat by my side all through the night, slowly replacing cool aloe fresh on my hot burned body. And her love and aloe healed me. And it took me decades. I told you I was going to be 62 on Saturday, right? It took me decades to see what had been sitting right in front of me all along. My mother wasn't teaching me how to grow aloe. She's teaching me how to love. The aloe just happened to be the lesson plan. So maybe that's why I couldn't bear to throw those babies away. Maybe that's why I had to bring them in every night and bring them back every morning. Maybe that's why I had to find a home for every single one of them like they were little kittens. Because when I share that aloe, it's like I'm sharing some of my mom's love. And now all around this town. My mom's aloe is growing in the kitchens and the living rooms of friends and family and even strangers. And it makes me so happy to think of her aloe growing in the homes of people I know and people I don't. And I like to think that her love is growing there too. We spend so much of our so much of our lives searching for the extraordinary, that we often overlook the extraordinary things that are sitting right beside us, hidden in plain sight. Mine just happened to be an aloe plant. Thanks.
Okay, Ryan. All right, Ryan right in front of me. I was hoping I'd pick you, Ryan. Okay.
I'm going to share one story that I normally share. I'm from California. I'm from San Francisco and Oakland, California. I went to school in the Mission District. I grew up with, rainbow flags like all down the street. I grew up in a really diverse area. I come from a long line of alcoholics and drug addicts. I grew up in many different neighborhoods. I think as a kid at a young age, I wanted to escape, and I wanted to escape for many reasons. Parents divorced when I was 5. I had behavioral issues after that. I guess they called my mother and they said, he's biting kids. Please come get him. He's just walking around biting kids. So she went and grabbed me, and stuff like that. And at a young age, I wanted to escape. I became a professional at escaping, whatever it was in front of me, cartoons and sugar, all kinds of stuff. I felt different at a young age. I felt very depressed at a young age. I didn't want to go to school anymore. I slept in a lot. I isolated a lot. I felt different, and I carried a lot on my shoulders. I was always trying to fix how I felt with outside things. That was the main theme. And I thought that you could only feel better if you fix things with outside things. Then I got to high school. Somebody, introduced me to weed and alcohol, and I loved it because it made me feel different. It changed my reality, and I could escape with something outside of myself. So I did that for a while. I did it because it felt good. I had fun. And then things changed very quickly. That friend of mine that I used to party with started smoking some pretty nasty stuff. It was laced weed, probably either PCP, embalming fluid, or it was bath salts. I've lived in the ghetto. We've moved away from pretty bad places. And, that's what he was doing. That's what he was selling to people. And it put me in the hospital. I had a break from reality. I developed bipolar disorder when I was 15. I was in a lot of pain. They put me on psych meds. I was overly medicated for 2 years. I was nodding off on psych meds. I had all kinds of stuff going on. And the one thing I wanted to do was never touch a substance ever again. So I got the help I needed. I got the therapy I needed. And I haven't done any of that for 10 years. So I haven't touched anything for 10 years. This is the one story I've told many times. So I did that. And what I learned from therapy, from getting the outside help I needed, from finding communities that experience the same things I've experienced before, is that I was always trying to reach for outside things to fix how I felt. It was always an inside job. And it was always about becoming intimate with my uncomfortable feelings. And that was the one thing I did not want to do. I didn't want to feel my uncomfortable feelings. I want to get away from them. And that was the one thing that I had to do, that a lot of people do. You sit through your feelings sometimes, and I didn't want to do that. And now I know today that's what I have to do. I have to continue to try and love myself and judge others on how I want to be judged. Just keep living this life aware and alive. And that's pretty much all I had. Thanks.
Our next teller is another first-time teller. We're so glad to have you, Miss Gabrielle.
I wanted to tell a story about growing up. my sister and I would go visit my grandmother in the White Mountains in New Hampshire. And my grandmother was just a lovely person, and she epitomized a homemaker. And she taught us how to sew, and she taught us how to bake, and how to identify the birds in her backyard. And she taught us to play games. And one of the games she taught us was called Hidden in Plain Sight. So the way it worked was that if we were going to have a big family gathering, because my mom was the oldest of 5 siblings, before everybody arrived, my grandmother would take a bunch of just random household things, like a button or a stamp or whatever, and she'd make a list of them, and then she would put them in her living room, and we would have to go around without touching anything and check off when we saw them. So there would be like on the thermostat, sometimes there would be like a red rubber band on there, the thermostat that my grandfather set at 62. And then there would be, there'd be a piece of spaghetti on the picture frame where she had done a needlepoint of the railroad station where my grandfather worked. And then my great-grandfather had been a sea captain and gone back and forth to Asia, and so he had brought back this Buddha, and there was always a dime in the Buddha's mouth. And so I have really fond memories of playing this game. I love this game. But for me, just that whole magic games at Grandma's house ended when I was in 5th grade, and my mom got diagnosed with breast cancer at age 39. And so she didn't tell us, she sent us to summer camp instead. And my sister and I got so many letters and postcards and care packages, like from people we didn't even know. Like we were famous that we were getting all this mail at summer camp. And then we got home, and unfortunately my mom had to have more surgeries than they thought, and so she was still in the hospital. And I can remember sitting on my kitchen counter in Blueberry Cove and talking to my mom on the phone, and she's in the hospital, and I'm like, so are you like sick or something? And it was, she kind of brushed over, yeah, I'm sick, but I'm gonna be fine. The whole message was like, she has cancer, but she's gonna beat it, and it's gonna be a battle, and she's gonna win, and she's so strong. And then there's lots of chemo and radiation, and it came back, and she's still fighting, and eventually she ends up having a bone marrow transplant when I'm in high school at Dartmouth, which is 3 hours away, and she was there for almost a year, and my sister and I were home alone, and but she had left us with a gas credit card, so that we could drive ourselves around, and sometimes we didn't know where we were going to get food, so we would take the gas credit card and buy dinner at the mobile mini mart, and we would have Pepperidge Farm cookies and Ben and Jerry's, and back then there were all these like 50 pots of Green Mountain coffee roasters on the counter, so we'd have like strawberry raspberry coffee for dinner, but we always spent roughly the same amount as a tank of gas. We wouldn't raise any suspicion. And yeah, we subsisted at the gas station for food. And she got better for a little while, and then she did not. The cancer spread. And when I was in my early 20s, she came out to visit me. I was working as a carpenter in San Francisco. And all this time, she's death's doorstep. I actually even remember a time in high school when I overheard somebody saying, like, oh yeah, Gabrielle's mom's gonna die. And I was like, no, she's not. Like, I felt defensive. She had told me she's not, so I believed her. She's not. But then she came out to see me in San Francisco. And around this time, my grandmother, her mom, had a series of strokes and could no longer communicate. And this is just an example of my mom. I'm living in south of Market before it's gentrified, and it's kind of known for S&M block parties. And just true to my mom, she's in her wheelchair, we just roll her by. There's like storefronts with like harnesses and all the special supplies for that. And she this is how she operates. She doesn't see it, she doesn't say it. We just don't talk about stuff. And so we're at I can picture my mind, 10th and Folsom, and I'm holding her, pushing her wheelchair. She's down there and I'm up here. And she says to me, it's so sad that I can't talk to my mom anymore, because her mom just had strokes. And I'm like, what? Like, you are going to have your mom for twice the amount of time that I'm going to have my mom? And I'm just like dumbfounded. I'm like, okay, so now it's okay to talk about that it's sad to possibly lose your mom? Like, we're allowed to say that? Like, I was just like, what is happening right now? And so then the light turns, we cross the street, we don't talk about it again. And eventually, not too much long after that, she is dying. I go back to Maine and we're with her, and she's in her bed, and there's no talk at all that she's dying. There's no talk about, here are these things I wanted to share with you, and I want you to remember these things, or I'm so proud of you. There is none of that. She dies. We squish all those feelings down into a deep, dark box. We're New Englanders, and I've heard somebody say something about, like, we keep our feelings in the barn, and my family literally had a giant barn, and that's where the feelings were gone, and I just went back to work as a carpenter in San Francisco. And a few months later, I'm back in Maine, and my sister and I are taking care of my mom's stuff, and I end up going to a party with friends that I went to wooden boat building school, and it's all a bunch of, like, dirty guys. And my best friend Trapper, he got married really young, and so his wife Mandy was there, and I always thought of Mandy as, like, this extraneous dingbat, and, like, who I really wanted to hang out with was, like, the guys. But Mandy came up to me and looked me in the eye. I don't even know what Mandy said to me, but she acknowledged that my mom had died. And it meant the world to me. And so I just want to say that I appreciate all the people like Mandy who see the diamond in the Buddha's mouth and speak up about it. And that sometimes it's hard because our feelings, I don't want to deal with them, and they're really sad. But that everybody in the world who can see things that are hidden in plain sight and can acknowledge it. I really appreciate everybody who does that. So, thank you.
Mr. Jesse Lepkov, who has also been here recently with his Bossa Nova Samba band, and he's been here to play for us at the Spotted Moth. So now we get to actually hear a story. I'm excited. Thank you.
My name's Jesse Lepkov. I live up in Marlboro. I'm not sure I wanted to tell a story, I'm not sure. I think there is a way that this relates to hiding in plain sight. It's more about maybe people that are in plain sight or what. But I wanted to tell a story. It's really about a relationship. And so I grew up in New York City, and then my parents moved to New Jersey, Teaneck, New Jersey, when I was about 12. And we were near the city. We always go back into the city. But my parents bought a place near Pikes Falls in Jamaica before I was born. It was a very special place. Went back there every year. And it was an idyllic childhood with other kids and families growing up. So, when I was a young man, I think I was about 17, I had a friend that went to a school called Simon's Rock. And it was kind of a high school in combination with the first 2 years of college. And I was invited up there to visit him. And while I was there, I met a girl, a woman, young woman, and we were both very young. I think she was 15, I was 17, but we had a thing, and I kept going back up there, and she came to my house, and I fell so in love with her, and I was I think I was a little young for such involvement, and I got really obsessed with her, and young love just was like all-consuming for me. And it was the 60s, and it was sort of promiscuous times, and well, she was sleeping around with other guys, and eventually, after about a year and a half, and over the summer, I had brought her up to my family's home in Jamaica, Vermont, and we had spent this idyllic summer out in nature, you know. But eventually it ended, and she told me it was over, and I just was so devastated by this, and it was very hard for me to accept. And I just was miserable and couldn't stop thinking about her. And then I went to chef school. That was my first career. I studied cooking, and then I got a job in Bennington, Vermont, at a restaurant, and it happened that she was with a boyfriend living in Bennington also. So, and actually her boyfriend became my second-hand man in the restaurant. I was the chef of a restaurant called the Brasserie, which was a really cool place, but that's another story. And it was kind of painful for me to be around her, and I still was in love with her. And this was maybe after a year or so after the breakup happened. And then I moved to Cambridge, Massachusetts, where I had a cooking job. And it happened that one of the circle of friends from Simon's Rock had moved down the street from us, and she was visiting there. and then I had a roommate, and one morning he was late for school, and I opened the door, and she was in bed with my roommate. So it was just like, you know, in one way I wanted to get away from her, but in another way I still felt the attachment to her, and I felt we were so connected, you know. But I moved away from there, and she was always in my thoughts, and I didn't have another girlfriend. I was alone, and a couple of years went by, maybe 3 years, I'm not sure at the timeline. But I was driving my car, I think I was driving from Vermont to New Jersey, perhaps. And I picked up 2 hitchhikers, 2 young women. And one of them sat in the back and one of them sat next to me. And one of them looked at me and said, "You play guitar, don't you?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah." And then she said, and you cook, don't you?" And I was like, "What? How do you know this?" And she said, your name's Jesse, right?" I had never seen these people before in my life. Oh my God! And I said, "Yeah, how do you know?" She said, "Well, I'm Emily's best friend, and I know all about you." So it was like, wow, I'm still not getting away. And anyway, I won't tell too much more of the story, except that she became my wife later on, and we had 2 beautiful children. And I just became a grandfather a year ago. My son has a daughter. And, you know, life changes, and sometimes things stay with you and are partly hidden, or they are hidden for a time and then they reveal. So I feel like it was kind of fate that we met and had kids. So that's my story.
Miles Ledoux? Okay, I'm so sorry, we skipped you. Here. And he is a playwright and an actor as well, a very fine actor. So we are honored to have you, Miles. I'm sorry I didn't find your paper. Okay, there you go, like a true writer here.
Hello, everyone. I'm here to tell the story of how I solved the mystery of the giant black cat stalking Crescent Street. So, I grew up in Canton, New York. It's a very, very small town, very, very far up north, northern New York, practically Canada. But it does have a golf course. There was a stir in the late 80s when a celebrity golfer came to play on the course, and he was a bit eccentric. He had a pet boa constrictor that he would always bring with him onto the course when he played. He must have been a really, really good golfer because he was so focused on his game that he didn't notice the boa constrictor slithering off. And no one could find it. They figured it must have slithered into the woods bordering the course. And for quite a while, anybody who knocked a ball into the woods, they weren't going in after it. So the police searched the woods and couldn't find anything. But then they started getting reports from some residents on Crescent Street. They said that at night they could hear something large moving around behind their houses. Now, the golf course is on the edge of town. Crescent Street is further into town. There's no way the snake could have slithered all the way across the course, across Main Street, and into this little neighborhood without being seen, right? So the police did a search behind the houses on Crescent Street, and they found a boa constrictor. Sadly, it was dead. But when they presented the golfer with the remains, he said adamantly, "This isn't mine." Now, the police were very patient with him. They knew he was bereaved, but they also knew that this is Canton, New York. And if there's one thing you can be sure of, it's that there are not two boa constrictors in Canton, New York. Right? Well, as it turns out, the dead snake belonged to someone on Crescent Street. And the police did eventually finally find the snake in the woods, where they thought it was all along. So, a weird coincidence, but one thing was left unexplained. Nobody could figure out how the dead snake had met its demise. Now, sometime later, the Plain Dealer, the local paper, received a letter to the editor, which I happen to have a copy of. As you can see, it was accompanied by a photo of what appears to be a gigantic black cat dwarfing a picnic table. It reads as follows. To the Plain Dealer, several weeks ago, your newspaper and others ran stories about a boa constrictor that had been found in the neighborhood of Crescent Street in Canton. They were all basically accurate and entertaining, but I am afraid that no reporter saw fit to seek out one of the principals in the story, namely, the cat that brought the snake home. It is to correct that omission that I write this letter. The cat's name is Dirk. Dirk has been usually quite well behaved, a bit rambunctious perhaps, but normally quite like ordinary cats. Upon occasion, however, for short periods of time, he seems to undergo this remarkable transformation. Such occasions seem to coincide with the approach of the full moon or of Halloween. As evidence of this kind of change, please see the enclosed picture, which was taken when Dirk was not looking. Please note that this does not simply explain how the boa constrictor was brought home by a cat, it also explains why there were no marks on the snake's body. Quite simply, he died of fright. Yours for truthfulness and the full story in journalism, a resident of Crescent Street. So, I came across this letter to the editor when I was doing research on local folklore for a story that I was writing. And I was intrigued. Generally, I am a skeptic, but between the mystical giant cat and an anonymous letter writer, I couldn't resist. So I went and I interviewed all the people who lived on Crescent Street, and slowly I pieced together the story of the golfer and the two boa constrictors. But more importantly, I found the house where Dirk lived. I knew the people who lived in the house. I'd been there before. I had seen this tree before. So it must have been a very weird experience for the people living there when I knocked on the door. Hi, Ann and Wade. I think there might have been a giant black cat living in your backyard a decade ago. Can I come in? So I asked them who owned this house before they did. And it belonged to a man named Tom Coburn. Tom Coburn was the dean and later the vice president of St. Lawrence University in Canton. And he was now the president of another university over in Boulder, Colorado. I sent him an email asking him what he could tell me about Dirk. I will never forget his response. Dear Miles, this is by far the most interesting email I have ever received. And he told me that his then girlfriend, now wife, took the photograph, and he was the one who sent the letter to the editor. Now, technically, he didn't confirm whether Dirk really transformed into a behemoth, or whether he happened to be standing on a windowsill that got cropped out of the photo. But it was very cool to learn more about the storyteller, if not the story itself. Thank you.
This is the point in the evening we've all been waiting for. Let's get all the tellers up here, okay? So if you've told a story tonight, please come up and make a line here, okay? And we're about to determine prize for the best story by applause level, to be determined, okay, by my very own hidden in plain sight husband over here, okay? So this is Ken, and you're gonna tell who gets the most applause. So live it up for whoever you think is the best teller. You get the first ever spotted moth hat prize. This is the prize.
Let's
No,
see.
it's not the hat.
I want to
okay?
guess.
It is the Vermontest gift you could get. A giant zucchini!